Welcome to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio, sponsored by EarthX, the world's largest environmental experience, and also sponsored by Natural Awakenings magazine. Live your healthiest life on a healthier planet. Now, here's your host, Bernice Butler.
Welcome to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio today. We are now near the beginning of our fourth season, and we remain just as excited as from the beginning to continue to help you explore and understand that unbreakable relationship between your health and the health of the planet. Here we look at the hottest topics related to our environment and its sustainability and how they affect your health and wellness. Here, issues like climate change, plastic pollution, extreme weather events, and others will meet up with everyday impacts like allergies and asthma, digestive issues and gut health, cancers, lung, heart issues, and more. So listen in today as we interview experts for today's show, our first in our series on waste and waste management. And today we're going to be focusing in on the environmental intersection of our consumption-based culture and its waste generation. Now, virtually every resident, every person, every organization, and every human activity in the U.S. and around the world generates some type of waste. Many different types of waste are generated, including municipal solid waste, hazardous waste, industrial waste, hazardous and non-hazardous, agricultural and animal waste, medical waste, radioactive waste, construction and demolition debris, mining, extraction waste, oil and gas production waste, fossil fuel combustion waste, and sewage sludge, and many more types of waste, including clothing waste. Now, the amount of waste produced is influenced by economic activity, by consumption, and population growth. In developed societies such as ours here in the U.S., we generally produce large amounts of municipal solid waste. That is, things like food waste, packaged goods, disposable goods, and used electronics, and commercial and industrial waste. And that is, again, demolition debris, incineration residues, as well as sludges from refineries. Among industrialized nations, the United States is one of the largest generators of municipal solid waste per person on a daily basis in the world. Now, waste generation, in most cases, represents inefficient use of our materials and our resources. But once generated, waste must be managed through reuse, recycling, storage, treatment, energy recovery, and or disposal, or other types of releases into our environment. Most municipal solid waste and hazardous waste are managed in land disposal units. For hazardous and industrial waste, land disposal includes landfills, surface impoundments, land treatment, land farming, and underground storage and injection. Our current approaches to waste management have evolved primarily due to health concerns and the need to control odors. Now, in the past, waste was often just deposited on land just outside of our developed areas and cities. And land disposal, though, created problems such as groundwater contamination, methane gas formation and migration, and disease hazards. The effects associated with waste vary widely and are influenced by the substances or the chemicals found in that waste, as well as how they are managed. The waste that humans generate has been detrimental to our environment for quite some time now. Humans are generating too much trash and cannot deal with it in a sustainable way. Waste that is not biodegradable and cannot be properly recycled is filling our oceans and our landfills. Now, the way we dispose of waste, though, is troubling also. And what's worse, in this decade alone, it would seem that waste disposal has become somewhat careless. What we have failed to do is put into action the ideas that have been proven and that we believe will help us mitigate or adapt to climate change. For example, the trash that is dumped in landfills reduces methane gas, and we'll talk about that a lot later with our guest. And to take that one step further, open landfills were found to represent 91% of all landfill methane emissions. And then the burning of large open piles of trash in various other parts of the world emits dangerous levels of carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas that has been proven to be heating up our planet. And researchers have calculated that approximately 40% of the world's trash is burned in this open fashion. And that poses large-scale risks to both our atmosphere and people that live near these burning sites. And then our beloved fast fashion leaves a big pollution footprint, with each step of the clothing life cycle generating potential environmental and occupational hazards. For example, polyester, which is the most widely used manufactured fiber, is indeed made from petroleum. And with the rise in the production in the fashion industry, demand for man-made fibers, again, especially polyester, has nearly doubled in the last 15 years. And the manufacture of polyester and other synthetic fabrics is a very energy-intensive process requiring large amounts of crude oil and releasing emissions, including volatile organic compounds, VOCs, particulate matter, and acid gases, all of which can aggravate respiratory diseases and issues. And the EPA, under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, considers many textile manufacturing facilities to be hazardous waste generators. Then there's food. Today, an estimated 1/3 of all the food produced in the world goes to waste. And that's equal to about 1.3 billion tons of fruits, vegetables, meat, dairy, seafood, and grains that either never leave the farm or get lost or spoiled during distribution, or are thrown away in hotels, grocery stores, restaurants, schools, and our home kitchens. It could be enough calories to feed every undernourished person on the planet. But wasted food isn't just a social or a humanitarian concern, it's also an environmental one. When we waste food, we also waste all the energy and water that it takes to grow, harvest, transport, and package that food. And if the food goes to the landfill and rots, then it produces the methane gas. Again, we described earlier, that's a greenhouse gas that's even more potent than carbon dioxide. About 6 to 8% of all human-caused greenhouse gas emissions could be reduced if we would just stop wasting our food. And in the U.S. alone, the production of lost or wasted food generates the equivalent of 32.6 million cars worth of greenhouse gas emissions. Now, management of waste is indeed a demanding and challenging undertaking in just about all countries, with important implications for human health and well-being, as well as environmental preservation, sustainability, and the economy. The World Health Organization and many other health agencies worldwide have addressed the health implications of waste in the past. And then improper waste management and illegal waste shipments can have negative impacts on both the environment and public health. Negative impacts can be due to different handling and disposal activities that can result in soil, water, and air pollution. And inadequately disposed of or untreated waste may cause serious health problems for populations surrounding the area of disposal. Then leaks from the waste can also contaminate soils and water streams and produce air pollution through emissions of such things as heavy metals and persistent organic pollutions, ultimately creating significant health hazards. Other nuisances caused by uncontrolled or mismanaged waste disposal may affect citizens negatively, and they include impacts at the local level, such as landscape deterioration, local water and air pollution, as well as just plain old-fashioned littering. Managing waste properly and in an environmentally sound way is therefore important for health reasons as well as environmental reasons. Despite the increasing recycling activities, landfills and incinerators are widely used to manage that final phase of waste disposal. And the health effects are significant, and they include things such as increased risk of cancer and mortality, respiratory disease, congenital malformation, and low birth weight. And also well-being is affected through the annoyance due to just the odor. Now, this is a lot, but here today to help us unpack and understand this some more are two experts who do this every day, and I think they're going to make us much smarter today. With us today, we have Jamil Admad Adi Varshneya. And Jamil is director of the United Nations Environment Program in the New York office. He leads work on sustainable development and the environment in support of the UN's organization's policies and programs. Jamil entered the Foreign Service of Pakistan in 1986, and he's worked in several duty stations across Asia, including Europe and Africa. And he was the lead negotiator on climate change for the Group of 77 and China, representing more than 130 members in climate change talks in 2007 under the UNFCCC. Welcome, Jamil. And did I get all of that right?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the generous introduction.
Thank you. And our other guest is Adi Varshneya. Adi is the U.S.-Canada Network Development Manager at the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives. It's called GAIA. GAIA is a network of grassroots organizations around the world working on waste and environmental justice. And Adi was raised in India and China. Welcome, Adi. Did I get all of that right?
Yeah, thank you so much. Really excited to be here, Bernice.
And again, I thank both of you all for making time in your very busy schedules to join us today. And we are going to go to break, after which we will just jump into all of these issues and let them really help us understand it more. We'll be right back on the other side of the break to talk more with Jamil and Adi. Thank you. We want to give a shout out now to our sponsors. That is Natural Awakenings, Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex Magazine, the Green, Healthy, and Sustainable Living Authority for the DFW Metroplex and North Texas communities. Print issues of Natural Awakenings can be found in most Whole Foods markets, natural grocers, Central Market, sunflower shops, and many, many other locations, as well as available free for download online at nadallas.com. Check them out. Our other sponsor is North Haven Gardens, serving the Metroplex since 1951, the most respected horticultural establishment in North Texas, offering gardening and plant education, concierge services, DIY classes, gifts, and more. And we are told with the best Christmas trees in Texas. Check them out at nhg.com. And our other sponsor is Lynn Dental Care, practicing dentistry for over 38 years with a holistic approach. None mercury, looking at the whole body. Specializing in periodontics, Dr. Lynn is board certified by the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. Check them out at lindentalcare.com. Thank you, sponsors. Welcome back to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio. To today's show, the first in our series on waste and waste management, environmental and health effects. And today we're focusing in on the environmental intersection of our consumption-based culture and its waste generation. And we are back with Jamil Admad with the United Nations Environment Program in New York and Adi Varshneya with the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives. Again, thank you all for being with us. Now, I want to start with Jamil. Would you tell us a little bit more about the United Nations Environment Program and what you do and how you do it?
All right, thank you, and it's good to be on the show with you. United Nations Environment Program is the lead UN agency which keeps the world environment under review. And then in doing that, in cooperation with scientists, research institutes, and governments, it promotes policy options, gives policy options to governments and to others, how to keep the health of our planet healthy. And in this, we focus mainly on the major issues which are affecting the health of the planet, including climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, chemicals, and of course waste, which we are discussing today. So in these areas, we do research assessments, scientific assessments, and then give policy options to governments based on that science that we develop with partnership with others. So we work with the private sector also and the civil society, and as I said, with the youth as well. So this is how we operate. Of course, we are an intergovernmental organization where all the ministers of the world of environment gather in the United Nations Environment Assembly, which is the legislative body of the United Nations Environment Program. We are based in headquartered in Nairobi, Kenya, as the first UN agency which is headquartered in the Global South. Of course, now we have another sister agency called UN Habitat, which is also based in Nairobi.
Now, it strikes me because on our show, and again, we've been, as mentioned, broadcasting for 3 years. We're starting our 4th year. But through all of that time, I've talked to and gotten to know a lot of people at the World Health Organization. And just speaking with you and listening to what you do, I have to think that you all work closely with them.
Of course, this is the main objective of the United Nations family, that we work through one UN approach where all these issues are interlinked. We now have the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which was adopted in 2015 with 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are all interlinked. So when we talk of health, of planetary health, of course, it includes the health of human beings. And when we talk of human health, that is greatly and directly affected by pollution and by waste and by other phenomena which happen on the planet, including climate change and global warming. So all these are interlinked, and all UN agencies work in collaboration on the ground and also in their normative work when they produce reports and scientific assessments. They bank on each other's expertise.
Indeed. Thank you for that. Now, many people, of course, do point to overconsumption as the cause of waste generation and our waste management problems that are plaguing our environment, which, of course, is the core of our show. But what do you see as the major drivers in the world and in the U.S. of waste generation and our waste management problems and issues?
Well, you mentioned in the very beginning to our consumption-based culture. That lies at the heart of many things. Of course, we are living in an economic paradigm which is premised on more production. So when you begin from that premise, of course, then consumption becomes an equally important aspect of that paradigm. We have crossed the 8 billion mark of population. By 2050, this will go further up, I think, to 10 billion. So providing a big population like this is also a challenge, but the challenge does not come from the lack of resources. The challenge comes from the overconsumption of resources. We, at the moment, are using the natural resources of the planet at a very fast rate. There's a day called the World Overshoot Day, which is marked to point out the day on which the humanity on planet uses the natural resources of the whole year. Over the years, it has come down, and now we have the World Overshoot Day in July. So that means by July, by the 7th month, we consume the natural resources of the planet of the entire year credit. So then for the next 5 months, we borrow from the next year. And that is, in fact, borrowing from the next generation. So that overconsumption is the main driver. And that's why the United Nations is trying, and UNEP is trying to promote the sustainable consumption and production agenda, which tells people to consume less and to provide and arrange for ways in which waste is managed. Because 80% of biodiversity loss is also coming from the waste that is generated from the food systems. And then if we don't change our behavior towards consumption, we are going for a big trouble.
And I don't know where we got the idea and begin to live the idea that better living and more consumption is a good thing and speaks to our affluence. Wouldn't it be cool if the benchmark were how much you can conserve or how much you can reuse, that would be the benchmark of success?
Well, the benchmark of success is a healthy living. So you can devise as many formulas as you want, but we have to keep in mind that we live in a world which is defined by inequalities among nations, between nations, and between communities. So we have to make sure that we consume in a way that is in a responsible manner, and we don't deprive the less fortunate of their share in what we have from nature and from the planet. So there are different models for this. We have a new, but we have to find a new business model which is not based on the premise that more is better.
Indeed, indeed. Like I said, I hope I could be around in a day. I doubt it. That I'll be around in the day when again it's defined as how sustainable we are, or how little we can consume. Indeed. So, what do you see, I guess, globally as the specific environmental problems and impacts of the waste generation?
Well, as I said, waste generation has very direct implications for the planetary health and for human health. For example, you mentioned in your introduction the dumping of waste, human waste, municipal waste, all sorts of waste. When we dump municipal waste in open dump sites, it generates methane, which is much more potent, 28 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And it is a major accelerator of climate change. At the same time, the World Resource Institute tells us that 1/3 of the waste generated is not safely managed. So when it is not safely managed, it can pollute water, it can pollute air, and it can lead to different diseases. Open waste burning is also an issue which releases black carbon, or soot as we call it, which is a particulate matter, and which also then adds to the air pollution, which leads to asthma and other respiratory diseases among the world. More than 7 million people every year in the world lose their lives and die because of polluted air. And this can definitely be controlled. So there are direct consequences of waste. We throw about 8 billion tons of plastic waste into the oceans. And that oceans, as you refer to polyester and other fibers, the microplastic, they degenerate into smaller particles, and then they go into our food chain. So maybe the fish that we eat contains plastic. We have to be careful.
One last thing, and then I want to talk with Adi. And you mentioned methane that's generated by landfills. And because I have allergies, I can tell when I am passing a landfill by the smell. But could you tell a little bit about the health impacts of methane? Because we're all affected by that, and we usually don't know it.
Right. So to be frank, I'm not a medical expert in that sense, but as I said, methane is 28 times potent than carbon dioxide. Definitely the air pollution and including methane would lead to a lot of upper respiratory diseases like asthma and chest congestion and problems with lungs. And so I too have allergy, and I do feel these effects when I pass by an open dump or a place where there is waste. But definitely air pollution and methane has a big role in air pollution.
Yeah, I have to think it's causing some respiratory issues too. Thank you, Jamil. Again, just about a minute or two to go, and I want to go to Adi. Can you tell us more about the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives and what you all do, your special sauce, Adi?
Yeah, so Gaia, like you said earlier, is a network of hundreds of grassroots organizations around the world working on waste and environmental justice issues. And I want to put out that a lot of these people in these grassroots groups that we work with are just everyday people like you and me who decided to take action and start organizing in their communities to work on these issues. Many of these folks have or have had other jobs, have kids, families, but have decided to get organized and mobilize people to fight polluting infrastructure like incinerators and build towards zero waste solutions in their areas. And what we're really looking at when I'm talking about environmental justice is addressing the intersections of environmental degradation, climate change, and how waste impacts them, as well as issues related to class, race, and other forms of global inequality, and really centering the voices of those who are most affected by all of these issues. And so at Gaia, we're working to power a transition away from this current linear, extractive, make, take waste, model of the economy and towards a circular system that supports people's human right to a safe and healthy environment. And so this means fighting pollution, building solutions from the ground up, pushing for policy change and campaigning, shifting finance and international policy, as well as research and communication initiatives, and of course, building a big grassroots movement.
Indeed. And we're going to need to go to break. But after the break, I want to come back to you, Addie, because I'd like for you to maybe give us some examples because I've found that most people start that activity because of something that happened to them. So when we come back, I want you to, if you would, give us some examples of some things that have happened to form some of these groups. We'll be right back on the other side of the break with Jamil Admad with the United Nations Environment Program and Adi Varshneya with the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives. Thank you all. Welcome back to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio, to today's show on the environmental intersection of our consumption-based culture and its waste generation. And again, we are back with Jamil Admad with the United Nations Environment Program and with Adi Varshneya with the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives. Again, thank you all. And before the break, Adi was talking to us, and I want her to tell us some examples of some things or activities with some of the groups that she's been involved in that caused them to join or become involved with Gaia.
Yeah, so a lot of the people we work with are folks organizing in communities with harmful waste incinerators. So waste-to-energy incinerators are the most polluting form of energy on the grid. These facilities are dinosaurs which require a lot of local public money to fund them, even though they're causing all of this climate pollution and all of these public health hazards. Effects range from cancer to neurological development problems. So people who have identified these as major problems in their communities have started groups and started organizing against them. For example, we have a member in Baltimore. Her name is Shashonda Campbell. She's awesome. And she started organizing way back in high school because her community, which already had an incinerator, was going to build another one close to where she went to school. So she and her classmates began organizing and actually successfully shut down this incinerator proposal. And she remains an organizer fighting for zero waste solutions and fighting against the other incinerator in Baltimore to this day. We also have other folks who, are just really passionate about other aspects of climate change and environmental harm. If they're not directly impacted, they see how we will all be impacted by climate change. 80% of incinerators in the United States are in low-income communities and communities of color. And there's a total of 4.4 million people living within a 3-mile radius of all the incinerators in the United States. So, that's a lot of people who are directly impacted, but all of us end up being impacted through the climate crisis.
Well, indeed, and I like to always point that out. The people who live nearest get most of it. But maybe I've heard figures as to how far the dust or the pollutants from the incinerator travel. I mean, it's not just the people who live within a few miles of the incinerator that are being affected. If the Saharan red dust can get from the Sahara in Africa over here to the United States, I'm pretty sure that pollutants from that incinerator, particulate matter, is going a long distance as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Here where I live in Manhattan, a lot of the west side of Manhattan sends its waste right across the Hudson River to be burned in an incinerator in Newark, New Jersey. Manhattan, as you probably know, has a lot of really wealthy people. It's not all wealthy folks, but a lot of them. And, their waste is being burned right across the river. And, we know that some of these are just coming right back across and affecting us too. So, yeah, air doesn't recognize city or state boundaries.
Yeah, that's a big point that we try to always make here on Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio is that even though we may not perceive that we are part of that vulnerable population, i.e. in this case, the people who live across the street from or around the block from the incinerator, nevertheless, we have to care about this happening to them because it's happening to us also. Now, I want to ask you, I find it challenging to fathom that localities are still entitling or approving construction of incinerators.
Yeah, I mean, totally. And unfortunately, there's just all sorts of regulations that prop up these, essentially failing incinerators. They get renewable energy credits, which, diverts money away from real forms of renewable energy by laws in different states, which classify these really polluting facilities as renewable. In a lot of places, they're classified as recycling, so they're eligible for subsidies involving recycling, even though in places like the European Union, there are forms of waste to energy that are banned from being classified as recycling. So, they're receiving all of these false subsidies and things that basically prop them up, even though they need to be phased out. And they actually cost cities a lot of money because if you're not sending enough trash to the incinerator, it's kind of funny. If you're not producing enough waste as a city, the incinerator is going to charge you for violating their contract. So the city ends up having to pay more money, which happened in Honolulu during the pandemic because tourism was down, the volume of waste went down towards the Honolulu incinerator. Honolulu had to pay the incinerator company money because they weren't producing enough trash, which is crazy to me.
It is. That's very interesting. But talk to us, if you would, for a minute, Addie, about the circular economy. The term, many people are not familiar with that term. So talk to us about how it's defined, what it is, and how can everyone move that whole field of circular economy forward?
Yeah, so, the circular economy is really a system where materials that are produced, extraction from the earth is minimized and things don't get wasted. They get plugged back in different ways. We are reusing things. And so you can really look to the zero waste hierarchy as a sort of guide. It describes this progression of policies and strategies that support a zero waste system. Many of you have probably heard of reduce, reuse, recycle. A lot of people don't know is that those things come in order for a reason, and at the top of that, before we even reduce, there is rethinking and redesigning. So we really need systemic change to redesign systems to avoid needless and wasteful consumption. And so these are actions which address the root causes of this current linear make-take waste pattern of how we use materials. And then we get to reduce. So, reducing the volume and quantity and toxicity of products and things that get discarded. And while, reduction is important, it is important to also acknowledge that people's basic needs need to be met, and people need to reduce at different rates. Wealthier people, use a lot more than people with less money. And this pattern remains consistent around the world. If the whole world consumed as much as the average American, referring back to, World Overshoot Day, we would need 5 planets to sustain that level of consumption. So, it's time to rethink and redesign our consume culture and also reduce based on how much we, want to admit to ourselves. We have to be honest with ourselves. What do we not need? Then there's reuse. So about 5% actually of materials buried in landfills or burned in incinerators are actually reusable items. So there's a huge opportunity to salvage materials there. And a lot of folks are actually creating successful business opportunities out of reuse initiatives. And then there's recycling and composting, of course. And then at the very end, after we do all of that, we look at what's left over and think about why were these things wasted? How do we handle these things in a way that does not threaten the environment or harm human health? So just some aspects of different points of intervention along the way.
Indeed. But basically, we're saying a circular economy is reusing something once it's been produced, is reusing it basically over and over again, finding ways to, like you said, recycle or repurpose so that product or the materials in that product can be used again.
Totally, yeah. Redesigning the system, reusing things, making things more durable, finding alternate delivery systems for products, compost, which people love. Compost is actually really fun and exciting and has a bunch of other co-benefits. So there's so many things that make up a circular economy, and I think it's something that we should really be excited about and see the opportunity in.
It seems like, though, a major point or focal point in the circular economy, and I think you mentioned it, has to do with designing the thing to begin with. But what is it? Beginning with the end in mind. When you make that packaging for that food or for that clothing or whatever, when you start it, when you design it, at that point, you need to give thought to what is and what can be the end use for this.
Absolutely. And that's why advocates around the country and around the world actually are pushing for producers to take responsibility over the full life cycle of the products that they're producing. So we're paying them money for these products, and then we also have to basically pay them again because they're avoiding the responsibility for paying for the end of life of their product. We are paying for that through our tax dollars, so if producers have to pay for the end of life of their product, they will be incentivized to redesign it to be more circular because currently that incentive just doesn't exist for them. They're able to push their costs onto us.
Indeed, but I can see where we as consumers can have a big part to play there as well. In terms of demanding, or if there's some kind of incentive for us then to push that back to the manufacturer. You probably weren't around, but I remember the days when we used to get money for returning a glass soda bottle. And that was a big incentive. We're going to be going to break shortly. But after the break, Jamil, I want to talk to you about the United Nations Environment Program and what y'all might be doing or your thoughts on the circular economy. What are you doing? Where is it going? What can we do? We'll be right back on the other side of the break with Jamil Admad with the United Nations Environment Program and Adi Varshneya with the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives. Thank you all. We want to give a shout out now to our sponsors. That is Natural Awakenings, Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex Magazine, the Green, Healthy, and Sustainable Living Authority for the DFW Metroplex and North Texas communities. Print issues of Natural Awakenings can be found in most Whole Food markets, natural grocers, central markets, sunflower shops, and many, many other locations, as well as available free for download online at nadallas.com. Our other sponsor is North Haven Gardens, serving the Metroplex since 1951, the most respected horticultural establishment in North Texas, offering gardening and plant education, concierge services, DIY classes, gifts, and more, and we're told with the best Christmas trees in Texas. Check them out at nhg.com. And our other sponsor is Lynn Dental Care, practicing dentistry for over 38 years with a holistic approach. None mercury, looking at the whole body. Specializing in periodontics, Dr. Lynn is board certified by the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. Check them out at lindentalcare.com. Thank you, sponsors. Welcome back to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio today for our show on waste and waste management, focusing in on environmental intersections of our consumption-based culture and its waste generation. And we are back with Jamil Admad with the United Nations Environment Program and Adi Varshneya with the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives. And again, thank you all for making time to be with us. Jamil, I wanted to go back to you and have you tell us what the United Nations Environment Program thinks of the circular economy, what you all might be doing in that area, and how do you see it benefiting?
Yeah, thank you. I think circular economy is the center of our work relating to sustainable consumption and production, because what we want to promote, this is also SDG 12, relates to sustainable consumption and production. We want to do better with less, let's say. That's the main idea. And Aditi had very clearly highlighted the need for a systemic change to redesign production. That is important. So we have a 10-year framework program for sustainable consumption of production. And then that framework has a 6 sub-programs, and they relate to sustainable public procurement, consumer information for sustainable consumption and production, sustainable tourism, sustainable lifestyle and education, sustainable buildings and construction, and sustainable food system. So all these 6 programs relate directly to the concept of circularity, to the concept of 3 Rs, and to the concept of sustainable behavioral change. Because, as you mentioned briefly, Bernice, we as a consumer also have a responsibility. We cannot just ask governments to change the production system or design the production system differently. We can definitely make a change, make an impact ourselves by changing our behavior, by consuming less or by consuming more responsibly. COVID has taught us that lesson, that we can live with less as efficiently as we used to. I used to wear just 2 jackets in the COVID years. I didn't used to buy new clothes or new shoes. So as you mentioned in the past, we used to trade the empty beverage bottles. I also remember we used to go to cobbler to repair our shoes and to repair our dresses and to reuse them. That habit needs to be reintroduced. I know we are under pressure from advertisements, and I know we are under pressure from peers to buy more and to buy one get one free and to get one half price. But it's difficult, even if we want to live sustainably. And this pressure from the market is telling on us. But we have to find a way where the youth, especially who are the future of this planet, change and make an agent for change, make themselves an agent for change, act as an agent for change, and introduce the concepts of circularity to the society as a whole, where we can then build a pressure on the industry and on the governments.
Indeed. And I think at the policy level, most of it is usually aimed at businesses and large institutions. But I can imagine a time and a situation where if there was something at the policy level where consumers were perhaps incentivized for buying biodegradable packaging and buying things that created less waste, that they would do that. And so hopefully we'll get there at that point. Jamil, the other thing, I know that research correlates waste and climate change. Can you help us understand this important connection? Can you kind of connect the dots for people, how we get from waste to climate change?
Well, waste, as I mentioned just briefly earlier also, has implications for climate change in terms of the increase in greenhouse gases, whether that is methane through the dump site or whether that is carbon dioxide to the burning. So that is a very direct consequence for that. Pollution of water, pollution of water bodies, ecosystems, aquifers, they are directly related also to waste. And in the effect on human health, again, it will have impact on economies. We hear from WHO that $1 invested in fighting pollution will save $30 in economy. So that investment is worth doing, and the linkages between these various dimensions of our planetary health to human health need to be explored in a way that we raise awareness for action by all.
Adi, can you talk a little bit about landfills, what they are, how they're created, and their involvement in this whole waste and waste management process?
Yeah, so, landfills are really expensive and they threaten the environmental health of nearby communities and release huge amounts of methane emissions, which, methane is a greenhouse gas that is more potent than carbon dioxide. And as of 2020, the U.S. is on track to have just 18 years of remaining landfill capacity, and according to the EPA, it can cost over $1 million per acre to construct and operate and close a landfill that is in compliance with existing regulations. So, these are really expensive, and rain and snow percolate through landfills, picking up contaminants from the waste, turning into a toxic, sort of nasty landfill juice called leachate.
Yeah, leachate.
And so the protective liners and leachate collective systems fail over time. And when this leachate leaks into groundwater, it pollutes the water bodies and the wells that communities depend on. The waste industry is investing heavily in promoting landfill gas to energy systems to capture methane emissions. However, only a fraction of this methane is successfully captured for conversion to energy. The emissions impact of methane leaking out from these systems exceeds the small benefit of offsetting the small amount of carbon emissions onto the energy grid. And because organic materials comprises about 1/3 to 40% of landfill materials, investments in organics collection and composting infrastructure would lower methane emissions and significantly reduce the overall volume of materials that are ending up in landfills. So instead of trying to spend even more of our public money in trying to build sustainable landfills, it would be a lot more climate friendly to prioritize reducing the amount of waste entering them in the first place, starting with organic waste, which is really some low-hanging fruit.
And you indicated that we are going to run out of landfill space here in the near future. Do you envision, or is there someone working on a world where there will be no more landfills allowed?
Yeah, so, communities are pushing back against proposals to build landfills in their communities, just as they are with incinerators. And, it's really on the solution side. We have to be reducing the overall volume of waste so that landfills of this size and scale and incinerators are no longer needed. And there's models all over the country and the world, really, where people are implementing bans on single-use plastics. They're implementing community-based compost collection systems to reduce this waste stream. The solutions are there. It's really up to people to take charge and advocate for these in terms of policy and start building solutions at the ground level to really make them happen.
But I have to wonder, if there were no incinerators and if there were no landfills, would that encourage better, faster action and solutions?
Yeah, right now, incinerators and landfills are, one way that we in this country are dealing with waste, but we're also sending it to other countries, which sort of allows people in power to ignore the problem. Yeah, so we're getting rid of all of this waste, dumping it in, countries like Malaysia and Thailand so that we don't have to deal with it. And so these sort of pressure release valves for our waste are helping us ignore the problem instead of reducing waste.
Indeed, but it seems as though these other countries are getting a lot smarter and not taking our waste. I know China was an issue there too. Really briefly, we only have about 2 more minutes to go. I want to talk, I hear a lot about right to repair and that right to repair movement. Can you tell us about that and how it manifests itself worldwide?
Yeah, so there is a growing amount of electronic waste in particular, mainly fueled by higher rates of consumption around electronics, short life cycles, planned obsolescence, and limited repair options. And so right to repair laws is a category of laws that require manufacturers of consumer goods and electronics to build their products in a way that allow customers to repair their goods without having to go through the manufacturer. So this not only saves money, it also aims to make consumer goods last longer and cut down on waste at the same time.
Jamil, you wanted to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I think this was a good point, the right to repair. It also leads to another waste issue, which is the shipment of EU waste to developing countries from developed countries. And that is leading to huge environmental problems and health problems in poor countries where these electronics are dismantled and then used and sometimes misused and then go into the garbage. So illegal shipment, some of them it's illegal, some of them it's legal. Plastic waste is also shipped out. And also, as you mentioned in the beginning, some organic pollutants like urea and other fertilizers, they are dated and they get wasted and sometimes transported for incineration outside. So this is a big issue also on an international level.
I imagine your program does a lot of work on that. We just have less than a minute to go. And Jamil, just really briefly, how has the COVID pandemic been impacted by waste generation, or how has it impacted the waste? It goes both ways.
Well, in two ways. In one way, as I said, it reduced consumption because people were at home, people didn't used to go to office and work, so there was less consumption in terms of energy, transport, even food. But on the other hand, the single-use plastic, which were used for health requirements and the protective gears of nurses and doctors, that produced billions and billions of tons of single-use plastic, which was not properly handled, properly managed, and properly disposed. So it did have a big impact, and that is something which worried the World Health Organization and other UN bodies, and there were initiatives to help governments, especially in the developing countries, to tackle that.
I really appreciate you all today. You have made us smarter. We have been today with Jamil Admad, Director of the United Nations Environment Program in the New York office, and with Adi Varshneya with the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives. And they really have made us smarter about the impact of waste in our consumption-based economy and how it generates all that waste, and environment and our health pays for it. So thank you so much. We really appreciate you being with us today. And thank you, audience, for listening in today to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio. The conversation starts here, but our goal is for it to continue in your home, in your social circles, your workplaces, at the water cooler, and in the grocery checkout line, so that we can all work together to realize that healthy living is simply not possible without a healthy planet. Our culture is a result of 1 trillion tiny acts taken by billions of people every day, like ourselves, like yourselves. And each of these tiny acts can seem insignificant, but all of them add up, one way or the other, to the change that we each live through. This is your host, Bernice Butler. Thank you for listening in today, and listen in again next week for more in our series on waste and waste management. Thank you.